To be or not to be? That is the question. Nah, I'm playing. William Shakespeare, like 1500 and something. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate everybody stopping by very much. So I have the round 7 game between Wesley and Vladislav Artemiev. And of course, for all of my people in the Philippines, I will say Mabuhay, Kamusta na, Masaya Kong Makita Kang Muli, Maraming Salamat po sa nanunood inga king ma video, Magandang umaga, Magandang araw, Magandang apon, Magandang gabi. Mabuting pagbati, ingat lagi, almost tayo, Magalunch na tayo. I think I covered a lot in that. But I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. And anybody who is coming from Russia, I would say privyet to you. Kakadela and spasibo for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. I appreciate it very much. But if you guys are ready to go, let's go and see what we have for the game. So we have E4. So we got a little change from the D4. So we see C5, knight coming to F3. We got E6. So we have the Sicilian defense. These are like really common moves. I mean, you know, a lot of the times, you know, backing up, you know, you can't see D6, knight coming to C6. You know, there's all kinds of, you know, variations and stuff. You know, of course, you got the Najdorfs coming up. So, but we do see E6. I mean, you know, E6 is very logical. You know, at some point we might possibly push D5 or D6. You know, get this bishop out, get this knight out. You know, get castled. It's always a good idea. So we do see G3. So we have, you know, it's a pretty solid line. It's not the most commonly played, but it definitely is solid. So we see knight coming to C6. See bishop to G2, of course. We got knight to F6. Knight coming to C3. And then we do have D5. So we see pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5, and then we see D4. And usually in these positions, you know, you do have black having an isolated pawn. But as you guys know about isolated D pawns, you know, a lot of times they can be very dynamic. So they're definitely not the same as having another random, you know, isolated pawn. So we do see pawn takes D4, knight takes D4, and then we got bishop to G4. And now you actually kind of make a move that you really don't necessarily want to make. F3. I mean, you don't necessarily have to make this move, but, you know, it does, you know, do the best with trying to block this bishop attack. But like I said, I mean, it's not so desirable because, you know, you already had this bishop, you know, before this point, like opened up on this nice diagonal. You know, you're kind of adding some pressure to this pawn. You got the knight hitting it. You know, once the knight, you know, possibly moves somewhere, you know, you kind of clear the way for your queen to start attacking too. So, I mean, it's really ideal to have, you know, this position, especially when you fianchetto a bishop. You know, you don't want to just block it with a pawn. So that kind of defeats the whole purpose. But we do see F3. We got bishop back to E6. We see bishop to E3. We see bishop to B4. We have castles, and then we have bishop takes C3. And bishop takes C3 is the novelty of the game. And I mean, the position is sound for white, but you do kind of have, you know, some double pawns here. So it's not the best ever. So black basically says, hey, man, I got a weakness, so you get one too. So we see castles. We got rook over to B1. But I mean, you know, you do have these double pawns, but at the same time, you do have this open file for this rook, and that can become relevant at some point. We do see queen to D7 defending that. We got knight takes E6, queen takes E6. We have rook over to E1, you know, because we would love to make some type of discovery attack if the queen just, you know, hangs around. So we do see queen back to D7. You know, we were going to give up a pawn to win the bishop, but now, you know, the bishop is defended. So we see bishop to G5, and we have queen to F5. You know, ideally, you know, if the bishop takes here, we take back with the queen. But Wesley has a nice little plan to make that impossible. So we do see H4, we see H6, and then we see the nice in-betweener G4. And so, you know, we're having a little bit of issues here as black, because we do have our queen attacked, but we also do have this pawn attacked as well. So every time the queen keeps leaving D7 with tempo, you know, we end up having to go back. So we do see queen back to D7. We see bishop takes F6, pawn takes F6. And then we have reached a point in the game that if you do want to stop the video and see what white should play in this position and what they actually do play in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So I talk to you guys all the time about like looking at your position and thinking like, man, okay, what are my weaknesses? what should I be playing? You know, how can I try to improve my position or improve my pieces in general? As you guys can see, I mean, both of these rooks are on open files. You know, we're going to be playing F4 at some point, you know, to clear the space, you know, to clear the way for this bishop. You know, the queen is not the horribly placed, but one of the main issues that you have in your position is this really, really bad C pawn, you know, the C3 pawn. So ideally you want to try to get rid of it. And so we do see C4 getting played. So if you did recognize that your position needs a C4 in it, you know, congratulations. It's not like it's just completely severely improving your position, because it does allow black to kind of get rid of their weakness. So sometimes, you know, you kind of have to give some to get some. So we do see rook to A to D8. We are able to take on D5. We see queen takes D5, queen takes D5, rook takes D5, and then we see rook taking B7. And we are a temporary pawn up. Rook goes down to D2. Absolute most logical move to be making. You know, putting your rook on the 7th. So we see F4. Like I said, I mean, we're opening up, you know, this bishop. So, you know, the position is really nice for white. It's not like winning, but it's, I mean, it's definitely, you know, pleasant for white. So we see knight to D4, placing a double attack, you know, placing a double attack on that pawn, but also threatening to, you know, possibly fork this king and this rook on a good day, as Nxd4 would say. So we see king to F1. We see knight taking C2. Rook to E2, rook to D1 with check. We see king to F2. We see knight back to D4, and then we see rook E to B2. We got knight up to E6. So you see black is trying to kind of pick at, you know, any little weakness that you know, that white has in their position. So we have a really nice in-betweener. Zwischen's move, bishop to F3, you know, attacking this undefended rook. So, you know, like I always say, you want to be looking at, you know, any undefended pieces that your opponent has in their position and trying to attack them. So the rook comes to C1. We see king to G3. So, you know, white has been able to pretty much take care of all of their weaknesses. We see rook to C3, pinning that bishop down. Rook 2 to B3. We see rook F to C8. We have rook up to B8. Rook takes B8. Rook takes C3. And we do see knight down to D4. We got bishop down to D1. And this is something I was telling you guys before. You know, if you're going to retreat your bishop, I mean, obviously E2 was not a possibility, because that was just going to be super lights out after this. You know, this is instructive because now this bishop is controlling like a lot of squares that this knight would try to jump into, you know, getting more into white's position. So we do see rook down to B1, trying to disturb that. So it can be a little annoying, but we do see rook to D3, defending and attacking simultaneously. So we got knight over to E6. We see rook to D5. We see king down to G7. We see F5. We got knight over to C5. We see bishop to C2. Trying to see if we can throw a tempo on the rook, and maybe the rook goes somewhere stupid and then we can win the knight. But that doesn't happen. We do see rook up to B5, defending the knight. We see king over to F3. We see rook over to A5. We see A4. We see king back to F8. We see king to E3. We have knight back to B7. We have rook takes A5, knight takes A5, and then we have king to D4. And I mean, all of the material is very equal, but something I want, like, basically when you're looking at this position, like as far as the end game is concerned, you know, there are a few things that you should notice that should kind of give you like an idea of who's doing better than who. First of all, you have this king that is like perfectly in the center of the board for white. You have black's king who is all the way back on their back rank. So that's definitely a strength right there. Also, there's a bishop against the knight in an open position. And also something else is white has their pawns very, very far advanced. So they are commanding a little bit more space than black. So this gives white a very clear advantage when all other things seem, you know, fairly equal. It kind of seems like, man, everything's pretty equal. The material's equal. Pieces are equal, but, you know, when you look into the situation a little bit further, you know, there's a little bit more that meets the eye than just material. So there's always different, you know, factor that you have to consider, you know, when you're thinking about who's better in a position. It's not just material. So we do see king to E7. We see king up to C5. We see king over to D7. King comes to B5. We see knight to C6. We see bishop to E4 because, like, you know, maybe black falls asleep and they're like, oh, I'm just going to make like a random move like this. Maybe they do that. And then you can just win the night for free. Like, you never know, man. I mean, things happen, right? So we do see knight to E5. We see king up to A6 because the most important pawn to try to become past or to worry about is going to be this A pawn, because you have the ability to grab this pawn and possibly get yourself in a situation where you can queen it. So we're going to be focused more on the queen side. So we see knight takes G4, king takes A7, we see king over to C7, and then we have king to A6. And unfortunately, black doesn't have the ability to oppose white in this position because this bishop is beautifully covering not only the queening square, but also this whole diagonal right here. So, you know, ideally you'd like to move down to king to C6, but you can't do that. So we do see knight to F2 because, you know, this bishop is really annoying. And then we see bishop to F3. We see knight to D3. We see king down to B5. We see knight to E5, further trying to harass this bishop. So we see bishop to E4. Knight comes to G4. We see A5. Now the pawn is starting to roll a little bit. We got knight to F2. We got bishop back to F3. And then we have knight to D3. And now we see A6. So as you guys can see, I mean, white takes 2 whole moves to attack the bishop. So every other move, you know, the pawn is capable of pushing. And, you know, the thing about the particular situation is you would like to try to get up and try to block this pawn. But number one, you can't get to this square. And also, if you were to place the king here, you would actually be facing, you know, king coming to B6. And now there's nothing that's stopping, you know, the advancement of the pawn. And you can just literally move this bishop as far away from the action as possible. So let's say, for example, we do go king to B6 and you got something like this. I mean, you can literally just do this. And I mean, you just have a long range control over this square. So you're going to be, you know, you're going to be, oh, actually, maybe not. I think that's better. Yeah, because you don't want that check. Maybe there you get check there. Anyway, you're going to be controlling these squares, ultimately. Because, I mean, the knight is not going to be able to continuously check. You're going to be able to attack it and stuff like that. Anyway, going back to what we had in the game. We do see A6. The knight comes to E5. And then we do see A7 because we're not worried about the bishop now. Because, you know, we're going to be queening next move. And it's doing its job at the moment of controlling this diagonal. So we do see knight takes F3. And then we see A8 equals queen. And as you guys can see, this is just 1000% won for white. There is not a way to, you know, win this position. I mean, you know, you might want to try to take here, but you're going to be looking at check like this. You know, the king would go up probably here, and then you would be looking at this bad boy here, and that's not nice. That's ugly. So that's just one possible variation. Anyway. That is that game. Like I said, it is taken from round 7. So it's quite a little while ago. But I've been trying to kind of split, you know, covering some Wesley sub, but then also covering, you know, the actual tournament itself. Trying to throw some of that out there. But for all of my people in the Philippines, I try to get these good mornings. I've been doing pretty good with them. So maanyong buntag, mayad na agahan, nainbeg na biga, masantos ya kabosan, marhe na aga, buenos dias, maanyong aga, mapia na uma, kapian kapuno dios, I think it's Mayap Abak. Yes. Mayad na aga, mapia agay, mapia kapapita, my big abukla, maraja na buntag, maria my nat, maupe na aga. I feel like I'm forgetting one. Kasanyangan CLOB. I didn't forget one. I keep thinking I'm forgetting one, but I didn't. And salam, assalamu alaikum, merci. However, you guys, you know, whatever greets you. And you know, spasibo for all of my people that are coming from Russia. I appreciate you guys very much. Meraming salamat, aking makaibigan, and paalam. I will see y'all next time.